About a year ago, I was riding in the car with my teenage daughter, and she's college age teen. This is probably a 2-hour drive, and I was asking her about her boyfriend. Now, to give you a little bit of background here, I know this kid really well. I've met his parents. Every time he comes over to the house, he will come inside. He has to sit, talk to the family. I say he has to. This kid will come in on his own. Anyway, I like him a lot, and I know him pretty well. But I wanted to know a little more, so I said, tell me a little more about him. And she was like, well, what do you want to know? And I said, well, whatever you want to share with me. Like, I just want to know more about him. And she was quiet for a minute. She said, maybe it's better if you ask me questions and then I'll answer them. I don't know how to explain how powerful a moment this was, but this was an important transition for us, because what she was really telling me was, I wanna talk to you about this, but I need you to help me walk through this minefield. Because for a young girl to be able to talk about something so personal and so private with her dad is really a huge breakthrough in terms of confidence and trust and transparency. I was really happy that we could have this conversation. And I want to contrast that with, well, I'll get to that. So I just started asking questions, and we were slowly working our way through various topics, even including the topic of, do you think he would be a suitable husband? Are you guys even talking about getting married and things like that? And so it was a very good conversation. And she answered honestly and pretty openly, I think. And it was wonderful. But rewind the clock about 5 years ago. I walked into my daughter's room and it's like, hey, we need to talk. And she was just full on panic, right? Just eyes got big, just emotionally. She hit the e-stop button, system shut down. She did not want to talk, right? I could tell her heart was pounding. This reaction came with her having no idea what I wanted to say or what was wrong. In the moment, 5 years ago, I told her, I said, I tell you what, you don't need to say anything. Just listen. And all these years later, I'm so glad I did that. Even though I don't know where that came from, really, it just sort of came out. And I just started talking. And she listened. And before I knew it, I was talking about all kinds of things that I had experienced as a kid, things that I had done, places I'd been, whatever. Everything that was all the peripheral topics related to the thing I wanted to talk to her about, including talking about that. And I'm being very vague because I want you to be able to insert whatever it is you're experiencing with your kids into this scenario. And imagine you having that conversation with your kid, because the actual topic doesn't even matter that much. Every kid's going to have something, and you need to be able to handle that. And I remember thinking when that conversation was over that it was successful. I think it went well, this approach of just speaking from my heart directly to her. And I removed the pressure of her having to say anything. So that was effective, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted. I really wanted to have a dialogue, and I wondered, why did she respond this way? Why was she so nervous to talk about this? But this is actually the kind of thing that will make anyone nervous. And in reality, we're all a little bit uncomfortable talking about things related to our bodies, like sex, or our intelligence, like talking about grades, or even our work ethic when we're saying they're not getting things done and not doing the things that we want them to do. These are all sensitive topics, and obviously that covers a lot of different things, right? Or if they are participating in drugs or something like that, and like these are all hot button, difficult to talk about conversations. If you only talk to your kid 3 times a year and it's always about one of those hot button topics, then they learn to react this way. They learn to, when dad or mom or whoever comes into the room, it's probably going to be about something I'm uncomfortable talking about, with my parents at least. So how do you fix that? I mean, even at the time I thought we were having enough of the other kinds of conversations, but this is when I came up with this idea of having conversations about nothing. This is about 5 years ago-ish. And I started implementing this with all my kids, where I would just make a dedicated effort to talk to them about whatever they wanted to talk about. There were no consequences, no pressures, and the topic didn't matter. The topic wasn't important, because that was the whole point. To build up a history of talking about things that don't have consequences, getting to know them better and understand them better. Because this is true for kids, for your spouse, for any adult. You wouldn't just walk up to a cashier and like, oh, she's beautiful. Hey, let's talk about your favorite sex position. Wait, hold on. There's a whole lot of other conversations we need to have before we have that one. And there's a whole lot more time investment you need to make. I need to know you and understand you and like you. You know what I mean? Like there's just a breach of trust and confidence. It takes time to develop that sort of relationship. And that's what I'm talking about with your kids. It takes time to build a relationship with you where they're comfortable with you about the things that don't matter, so that when you get to the things that do matter, you have that history of talking and being comfortable. And I know this person and I can trust them and we can talk. You don't get that instantly. So if I was going to break this into a series of tips and give them numbers, which really wasn't the intent, number one would be building a history of conversations about nothing. This is how you build a relationship. This is how you build a connection. And once you have established that foundation, then you'll be in a position where you can talk about the more difficult things. But you never get permission to access that secret vault without first walking through the more public areas of their life. Now, this is going to be tough for someone who wants to have a hard conversation tonight and they're trying to come up with a strategy, but that's unfortunately how it goes sometimes. And that was the case for me 5 years ago. I needed to have a hard conversation, and I haven't built up enough of a history with those not so difficult conversations. I mean, at the time I thought I was having them, but clearly there wasn't enough. And, as time goes by, you get smarter, right? You start to understand that the hard conversations leave a much deeper impression. The effect is much longer lasting. And so to outweigh that, if you will, you need to have significantly more of those unimportant conversations. The ratio between the two is very different. It can't be 1-to-1. And that's really hard for someone like me who is, just so introverted, so serious. I generally like to talk about really deep, passionate topics with just one person or maybe just a really small group. I don't enjoy being at parties or having small talk about anything really. And I needed to change that in order to break this. So how do you do that? How do you manufacture conversations when you're not actually interested in manufactured conversations? And then I changed my motivation. I decided what I'm really interested in is the conversation itself, not the topic. And so I made it my mission. I've now got a goal. And that is something I can be excited about. My goal is to sit and talk with you. I just did this with my son the other night. He's 16 years old. I walked into his room. I had no idea what I wanted to say or what I wanted to talk about. I just had one mission. We're going to talk about something tonight because we haven't spoken in a while. Just me and him about nothing. And it was really rough at first because he was like on the computer working on something. And I didn't actually have anything important to stop what he was doing. I just wanted to engage him. And so I said, the other night I had a dream, and this is true. I did have this dream. I was talking to you as an adult, like you had a full-on beard and you had kids and me and you were just laughing and talking. And it was like I was watching the two of us talk in this dream. And I couldn't hear the conversation, but I just remember the pride and the joy and the excitement of me looking forward to the day that I could talk to you as a grown man. And so he's like, okay, and he's listening to this and he's realizing how important this is. And so he turns around. We fumble a little bit more. Neither of us really have a specific topic, but he could tell like I'm here just to talk and we're going to do this thing. And somehow the topic of AI came up and using automation to make life easier, right? He's interested in engineering. And so the conversation was off then. Like, and it just led in all sorts of directions. That wasn't the only thing we talked about. We ended up talking about what it means to be a man and running your own house and having a family and like managing a budget and buying houses. And it just went all over the place. And we talked for over an hour. And at one point I just said, I think I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed. You have a good night. And I walked out. At his age, he is not very likely that he's going to come into my room and just say, hey, I want to talk to you. So as they get older, especially, more and more effort is going to be required from you to go seek them out. When they're young, they seek you out and they'll pull on your pants leg. And if you keep ignoring them, as they get older, they learn that you're not interested. Probably the most important thing you need to take away from this is the time urgency of it, right? Like there's only so many years that they're in the house with you. Certainly as a parent, you still have influence over their life as they get older, but just recognizing that if they're developing their own family and careers and they have other responsibilities that draw them further and further away from regular interaction with you. Your greatest influence is when they're in your home, and the earlier you start, like investing in the market, the greater the return you can potentially get. It doesn't mean you can't invest when you're in your 50s, retiring at 65, but your potential return is so much higher if you invest when you're 20 and retire at 65. And it's the same with your kids. Starting when they're really young and they know very little about life and the conversations are kind of silly and very shallow, and that's perfectly fine. You need to start there so that when they start interacting with more and more serious things and getting closer and closer to becoming an adult, where you want them to make good choices and be the kind of citizens we all hope they'll grow into be, that they'll be the kind of parents and leaders and so on that we want them to be. You need to have developed that history. Even though it can interrupt your work, even though it can be hard sometimes, I generally try to push back from the computer if they come into my office and turn around away from the screen, so I stop looking at whatever I was working on and just try to engage with them. It's so easy to just keep ignoring them, but each one of those little samples they walk away with builds up a history of dad not being interested. And that's the thing that you leave more than anything else is your credit report, your track record, right? Your history of being responsive, being helpful, being a leader, taking care of issues, being available, like whatever it is that you are as a dad to them in that moment, you have to be consistently those things for them. Because if you're not consistent, every time you come to them or want to engage with them, they're going to look at your credit report and go, yeah, I don't think I'm going to give this guy a loan. Because you haven't had a history of being available, of being consistent. So that's a lot, but that's just number one. The next thing is knowing your audience. You can't reason with someone you don't understand. To me, this is why countries fight. This is why all kinds of turmoil comes up. It's why Democrats and Republicans can't discuss even things that they agree on because they don't understand the other person. And so you can't have a conversation with your kid when you don't really understand why they think what they think. And we tend to think, well, we're just older and we know better. Sometimes it's just a matter of coaching them along to understand your viewpoint. They don't have the experiences that you have, but don't ever leave out the possibility that you could be wrong. Even though it's not usually likely when you're talking about your kids, it's still possible. I want to make sure I understand where you are, because at least at a minimum, it'll make me more effective at reasoning with you. When I understand your logic, I can use that same logic to help steer you in the direction that I want you to go. But there's a guiding process. They are still free agents, no matter how hard you try. And even though you are their parent and you can physically control them, even prisoners are still free agents, right? It's why we have to have security guards, because even though we told them to stay in there, if they don't want to stay in there, it takes a heck of a lot of work to keep them there. Your kids aren't prisoners, but you know what I'm saying. It's much better if they're willing to stay than if you have to persuade them with force. So knowing your kids is huge, and you only got to know them if you ask good questions. Get them to talk to you. When I start conversations with them, especially the younger ones who are much more talkative, I just, I ask. It's like, hey, tell me about X. And they start talking. It's like, really? Well, why is that? But what if you're wrong? Oh, well, that makes sense. Well, what if we change this? Like, you just think about what they're saying, engage with them, and let them lead the conversation. What's interesting about this is that the value is in the fact that these are unimportant conversations. You are trying to build up that history of those unimportant ones so it's easier to have the important ones. Just last night, I had a big family meeting. I called everyone in. I wanted to talk about something pretty serious that dealt with getting things done and, making sure that you're responsible for the things that I assign you. And, when you can trust a man with a little, you can trust him with a lot. And I've given you a task and you haven't been trusted with that. So that tells me that I can't trust you to have these other freedoms and so on. And so it's like, we need to balance your freedoms with the level of responsibility that you're showing. And I was just like laying down the law. But nobody got punished. This wasn't meant to be, you're in trouble. This was, I want you to know how serious this is, that I care about this thing. And I always want consistent good work, because that's going to matter. That's how you keep your job. That's how you become a person that people can rely on. That's how your spouse can depend on you in times of trouble. You want to be that person, the dependable, reliable, get it done person. But interestingly, right after that, my daughter comes into my room. I came back to my room after the conversation. Family meeting was over. That was a serious family meeting. I've had many ones that aren't very serious. Like, hey, I would love to take the whole family out of the country one day. Where will we go? I've done that a couple times. And we talk about various countries, and you realize what prejudices your kids have against different places. You don't know nothing about that country and you don't want to go. So anyway, that's a topic for another day. And it's a fun conversation to have, because you can challenge those ideas and you learn. Getting back to last night. So we had the very serious conversation with the whole family. And then my youngest daughter comes in and she's like, hey, read any good stories lately? It's like, yes, I read this story in Chinese the other night and this was what the story was about. She's like, wait, ran out of the room, got her brother, came back. She was like, go. And we had this fun conversation where I was just retelling this interesting story that I just read. The story was really entertaining. They got a big kick out of it. When the story was over, I said, I've been thinking about us moving to another house, but we have a problem. Like, the interest rates are really up high. I said, we've had a lot of inflation lately, and we spent almost an entire hour talking about the housing market, talking about inflation, and why it's a big decision to try to move now, because I'll be paying a much higher interest rate if I move for even a similar size house. But this is with, my preteen kids, and they're eating it up. They're engaged in this conversation, and it was great. And what I loved about it is because this is something I'm really excited about, but what brought them into the room is this retelling of a story that was a completely fictional story that was just something I read because I was practicing Chinese. But it was interesting to them to hear the content of the story. We all like good stories. I guess what I really want you to get from that is this is not even my story, and it's not even a true story, but it was something to talk about. And you can use that same tool, right? You can talk about things that you've read. You could talk about what happened to you as a kid, which gives that extra personal touch. You could talk about what happened to your friends when they were kids. And you can even talk about completely made up stories. I mean, there's no reason to hide that it's made up. It's like, hey, I had this idea for a story, or I read this story, and so on. So there are things to talk about. You just got to be determined to talk about it. Now, the examples I gave are conversations where I was able to turn it towards a topic I wanted to discuss with them. But that's not always the case. You don't want to come in, and the goal is not to control the conversation and just talk about the things you're interested in. I spend just as much time talking about dolls and talking about things I'm less interested in because I'm interested in them. And so I listen because I'm interested in them, and I engage in that. So you need to show genuine interest in what they want to talk about if you want them to show any interest in what you want to talk about. Don't forget that. And there's a lot of power in being mostly the quiet one in the conversation. That's hard to do at first because you kind of need to work it up to pull things out. But once you get them going, you should be quiet and just ask probing questions that keep them talking. It's the most effective way for someone to feel like they were listened to and that they connected with you. Because these are private, one-on-one conversations, this gets a little bit harder the bigger your family is. For me, it's 4 kids that I want to make sure I'm having an opportunity to engage with them both privately as well as in small groups and sometimes the entire group. But I'm doing the same thing with my wife. As far as the kids, it might be, let's just say, approximately once a month, an individual conversation with each of the kids. But and then that's not counting when they're in smaller groups or bigger groups. But then my wife, I try to do something with her every night in terms of having a heartfelt conversation about nothing, sometimes about something. But you need to create those opportunities. And even more so with your wife, she needs an opportunity to talk to you about what she's feeling and experiencing. If there are problems, you do not want to let problems fester. They do not get better by being ignored. And so if you can hear about those problems earlier and try to talk through them peacefully and listen to her so that you understand her perspective, which will give you more power and reasoning, you can come together and neither of you have to be a prisoner who's doing this unwillingly. You follow where I'm going with this? You need to find a way to find common ground and be able to talk and deal with issues. Don't ignore them. Don't ignore them. If you have to, put something on your calendar and schedule it so that you have an alert that pops up on your phone and it says, I have a random meeting with kid X tonight, and make it happen. Okay? If you don't think you can do it without a reminder, you have tools to help you get it done. The important thing is to get it done. All right, go be a dad.